Welcome to the Junto Men's Podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things related to men. We explore how to go from good to great, from high performers, and also aim to provide a shining light if you're experiencing darkness in your life. Grab a pen and paper and enjoy the ride. To talk about kids and sleep, maybe a little bit about nutrition, because sleep is arguably in the top 5 things that we need to survive as humans, and most parents don't get enough. Would that be accurate?
I would say most people in general don't get
Most people don't get enough,
yeah.
and parents seem to struggle as well. And I think I guess the reason I wanted to have you on and have a chat is because you know how there's that almost as soon as you become pregnant or when you have your first kid or whatever, someone will say, "Oh, good luck, you got to get your sleep in now because you won't get any when they're born or whatever." And it's like, it doesn't have to be like that.
No,
It doesn't have to be like that.
It doesn't have to be like that. You can literally have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, and that's what's sort of frustrating. Like we sort of just accept this, whether it's lack of sleep or you know, if we're talking about health, feeling like a big bag of shit.
Yeah.
We take that as like the status quo because of whatever situation, because it's normal.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, normal isn't a great measure in today's society for health.
Yeah.
With, you know, close to 75% of the population overweight. And I think for me, sleep is like the same, like, yeah.
And I just think it breaks my heart. And like before we started recording, we were talking about like forums and stuff. When people have goals and they say, you know, like I've got a 2-year-old and yada, yada, yada. And people go, oh, like cop it sweet. Welcome to motherhood. Like that's what you signed up for. And we shouldn't have to wear it like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Like if someone has a goal, good on them.
Yeah.
Like they can achieve that. And if the person's going to be judgmental and say, oh no, like that's not what you signed up for, they're probably just stuck because they don't know how to get to that ideal that they would like to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like to cut down, we got that tall poppy syndrome, right? To cut down other people who are doing well. So yeah, we wanted to jump on here tonight and talk a little bit about sleep and I guess how you can, as a parent, help your kids sleep better, because you are doing them a disservice by not helping them get into a good sleep routine.
Yeah.
First and foremost, and you're probably giving them some trauma for life that they'll have to overcome at some point in time. But you're also really making it hard for yourself by not, I guess, taking responsibility and maybe not making some hard decisions. And like, let's face it, like, who functions well on no sleep? Like, who functions well on 5 hours sleep?
Yeah.
No one.
No one. Not even in our early 20s.
And life just sucks. Life honestly sucks.
Yeah, it does.
When you can't sleep. And I really feel for those people who they have really genuine issues and stuff like that. But for the most part, majority of people don't necessarily set themselves up for success with their kids and with themselves. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a long intro.
No, I love that because it's actually just segued me into like some ideas that I want to talk about that will just nicely get us into that. And I think it is for kids, like sleep is a learned skill. And a lot of them that take notes, sleep is a learned skill. And I think some kids will naturally get it if you don't do any sleep training. And some kids are naturally more determined or sensitive, and they really need all that sleep training is. It's so much more than sleep, but it is actually the way that it's structured, because there's so much more science and research behind it now. Lots of early 2000s work is where it's sort of all come from. We're really just helping nature along and giving it a kick in the butt. So when you look at routines, timings, all that sort of stuff, we're working with nature to help the body clock kick onto a circadian rhythm that suits the child based on age-appropriate awake times, sleep totals, when their hormones change, body temperature drops, to create this sweet spot, putting them down for sleep, getting them up in the morning, all that sort of stuff. It's not like we're doing anything that's unnatural for them. We're just helping it along and picking settling strategies that suits their individual temperament and the parenting style too.
Do you think, I just wrote down, like, I guess that the whole working with nature thing, and it's almost like when kids are born, they're still born exactly the same as they were born 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago or whatever. So they're still born the same. It's just society has changed.
Yes.
So I guess when we talk about all the tribal stuff with health and whatever, you can talk about all these natural sort of methods. And I guess what you're saying is trying to take that natural stuff and because they're going to come into today's society, which is full on and different stimulations and different patterns and whatever, and trying to sort of help them find that.
Yes.
Rather than being wholly adapted to that.
Yes. And I think you're right. Like you bring up the tribal stuff and they're saying it takes a village to raise a child, but that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen these days.
And that's how we're built.
Yes.
That's how we're wired and how we're built to be raised. We're not, as parents, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're not actually meant to be everything for our kids.
No. God, no.
And we shouldn't try to be.
Yeah.
So, and that's that whole tribal thing. Right?
And I think a lot of the families that I work with are, they're professionals going back to work, they're Defence Force families, they may be isolated, they may have to follow their partner's work around, so they don't have that village around them, and they're suffering with their mental health because of it, and they need it as a necessity. And like, short-term hard work, long-term gain benefits the whole functioning of the family unit, which we'll touch on in a minute.
Yeah, I love that. We probably about 3 weeks ago, we were having dinner. So we don't have a dining table, we have a kitchen bench which doubles as a dining table because we have a small house. And anyway, one meal, so Kara's just sort of transitioned. She's only still little. We've just transitioned her out of her high chair onto a stool.
Yes.
And it's a pretty high stool, but she gets up and she's fine. She's almost 2, I swear.
Kids are bouncing.
It's good parenting, I swear. But she wanted to get on Sam's lap and eat her dinner one night. And I said, don't do it. Because you do it once.
That's it.
Well, I said, you do it once, you can break the habit the next day.
Yeah.
Because they'll try again.
Oh, yeah.
But if you do it twice, game over, you're set. And I think that's how I've thought about all the sleep stuff that we've tried to do with the kids.
Yeah.
Is like, all right, I'm going to do this once. Like we did it with Willow. One night with Willow, there was like a possum on the roof and it was pretty scary. Anyway, so I don't know, we did something, or I went in and I laid with her because she was pretty upset and that. And I was like, all right, cool, I can't do this tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And honestly took us a month to sort of like get back to her not needing us to go to sleep.
And it's with toddlers especially because, that's their job until they're 18 years old, but if they discover one thing, they're going to push that limit to see how far they can go, and that's just normal development. So, and you talked about, one day versus a whole month, and this is where a lot of people give it up, is they implement a new change, they get 3 days into it, and then there's a natural regression called an extinction outburst, which happens at any age. So the first 3 days might go brilliant, textbook, and then there's this extinction outburst between days 3 and 5 where the child will push back normal, and people go, oh, I worked for a few days, then it didn't work, so we just gave up. But actually, if you just keep going, once you get past that hurdle to days 5, 6, 7, you're sweet.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
And I think that's where a lot of people think like, oh, it doesn't work. It's like, no, like you just have to understand what the implementation of change goes through, that sort of natural progression of human nature, really.
And you obviously always get worried when there's like an escalation of the crying, or it's like, oh man, it takes more intense to that. We better go, something must be wrong.
And that's interesting because I often say to people, like, don't confuse the volume of the cry with the level of emotion.
Okay.
Because as they get bigger, they're going to get louder. They're going to get friggin' loud.
Yeah.
So they might be loud because they're yelling at you. That's their only way of telling you, hey, get back in here. We can't blame them for yelling at us. We know that, but it's okay. Like, it's listening to what sounds they're actually making, and is it a yell, is it a protest, or is it an emotional cry, and how do we respond to that? And then going off that, like, we look at crying and like, does it do brain damage? Probably like one of my most common most frequently asked questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so crying, only way for kids to communicate, we know that. So there's 3 levels of stress in crying. So positive stress, daily little stresses, so daycare drop-off, vaccinations.
Yeah.
The parental support is there and they'll grow and develop from it because it's just like a little thing, right? Sleep training actually falls into that one.
Yeah, right.
Tolerable stress is a bigger life event, so it might be a death in the family or moving interstate or something bigger, but the parental support is still there and they will grow and develop from it.
Yeah.
Toxic stress is where we see physiological brain damage happen because that's things like parental substance and alcohol abuse, neglect, physical abuse. So the parental support is not there.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
So sleep training, positive stress, daily thing, parental support's there, growing and developing.
Is that, I guess, do people consider some of the stuff like if you were to, if your kid's crying, obviously there's different reasons why they cry in bed. They've sort of talked about, you not going in there as like that, that really bad stress that you're not there.
So there's a difference between full extinction or full cried out, which is where you shut the door and you don't come back until morning.
Yeah.
So that sort of sleep training, which has a lot of research behind it, but not many families do it because a lot of families can't follow through with it because they give up after 2 hours, and that's actually really stressful because it's so confusing to the child. But that actually can lead to, the child just stops signaling for the parent. So that's a little bit different. And there is now studies coming out about that. There are varying levels of controlled crying, and that's like 2, 3, 4, 5 minute intervals, and you come back, reassure till they're calm, and then sort of give them a bit more opportunity and space. That is very different to shutting the door and seeing them in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I guess a lot of guys that I speak to do some form of co-sleeping, whether it's either they'll get into bed with their kids or their kids will come in through the night and won't leave, or they have to separate. I'm just thinking of one of my mates. I think one parent sleeps with one kid and the other parent sleeps with the other kid. So they're pretty common things.
Really common, because there's the reporting of co-sleeping is a lot lower than what it actually is. So I think it's reported at like 18 or 20%, but they're actually now finding that it's more actually closer to 80%. People just aren't reporting it because they know it's not safe. Yeah. So SIDS has released the co-sleeping Safe 7. This is a very confusing topic because SIDS haven't said that it is safe. They have acknowledged that people are doing it. And so if people are doing it, they're going to put out information as to how to do it in the safest way possible. So that's a really hot topic at the moment. So co-sleeping or reactive co-sleeping. So reactive co-sleeping is the child goes to bed in their own bed or cot or whatever it is, and then in the middle of the night the parents just sort of go, oh screw it, just come into bed with us. That's reactive co-sleeping, and that's really, really common. And like if you've ever shared a bed with a child, it's a drunken person looking for their keys in the bed, like you are getting literally kicked back. And yes, there's studies behind attachment and stuff like that, but we've also got to think about the relationship between the two parents as well and how important that is. And we can talk about sleep deprivation and functioning as a family unit, as a partner, as a wife, as a family member, as a work colleague. It is so much more than everyone getting good sleep. It is. Have you ever had a conversation with Sam in the middle of the night when either child was a newborn? How did that turn out for you, having a conversation?
Well, they're very productive conversations.
Very productive, yeah, not aggressive at all. No, never ends in a fight.
Never aggressive, sometimes passive aggressive.
Yeah, right. So I was listening to something for pure entertainment the other day, and they said something like, oh, we have a rule that if one of us wakes up with a kid in the middle of the night, we just don't say anything. And I was like, that's actually really good advice, because any sort of conversation you start in the middle of the night, it's going to end up pear-shaped. So if the person says, get me a slice of pizza, you just go, sure, yep, no problem, no worries. So I thought that was really interesting, but back to co-sleeping. So we can use, I would always recommend very gentle methods. So there's something called gradual withdrawal, or bedtime fading is how research refers to it. And it's simply like you might sleep on a mattress next to the cot for a few nights. So you're still co-sleeping, but you have that safety of separate sleep spaces. And then you just gradually move out, and you would just have like a chair and a cushion, and you just slowly move out.
Yeah.
Going from something like co-sleeping to a controlled crying or space soothing sounds nicer, so we call it space soothing. Like a duck in, duck out, it's too much shock for both the co-sleeping parent and the child.
Okay.
So that's too much of a shock for everyone. I would say naturally most methods turn into that anyway, because that's just sort of, okay, it's okay, just time to sleep, it's time for banana, and then you duck out. It naturally progresses to that anyway, but it is really important that is a gradual process and age dependent on how you changed along the way too.
Yeah.
But so much more common than is reported. And it is a really touchy point for a lot of families, parents sleeping in separate beds with children.
Yeah.
It can be a really hard thing to transition from. So
yeah, I think there's enough strain on the relationship already
becoming a parent
with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And then if you add in, well, now we don't even sleep together.
Yes.
Or we don't even have our own space.
Yeah.
Like there's just all these, if you I said something the other day, I said, if you want to ruin your relationship, renovate a house together.
Oh yeah.
But not necessarily ruin, but if you want to challenge it.
We're landscaping, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just
any sort of renovation. But I just think, like, if you want to tick the boxes to having a shit relationship where you begin to resent each other and you grow apart and all these sort of things.
Yeah.
It's like, cool. Don't sleep in the same room.
Yeah.
Don't do all these things.
So speak to any relationships counsellor and they'll say, the bedroom is for lovemaking and sleep.
Yeah.
Throw a child into that.
Neither of them.
I'm not doing it in the kitchen because I've just cleaned it and that's annoyed me and it's cold. No.
Yeah, you're not sleeping in the kitchen, are you? No.
I don't want to sleep in the But yeah, it can be really hard. And we were talking about this as well earlier, like that change from becoming a couple so quickly becoming a parent, and especially all that's the new research coming out about matrescence and it being likened to, so matrescence is going from being a person to becoming a mother in the space of your labour time, right? Versus adolescence, which is 10 years. So similar hormonal changes, all that sort of stuff, but it is compacted into your labour duration.
Wow.
Versus 10 years. And so that's why, postnatal depression and anxiety is so apparent, because you're going through that transition so quickly. We don't have the villages around us. We are expected to, with that perfect mother ideology that is created by society and the internet, we're expected to be this mother with a new identity, or be the primary carer with a new identity, as well as running every other facet of our life, remaining social, having friends, maybe working, all that stuff.
Well, even just learning how to breastfeed.
Yeah.
It's like, I know we had a lot of trouble with
same.
our first with breastfeeding, and yeah, I'm sure plenty of blokes can resonate about coming home and having their wife in tears. That's not a good feeling, and I'm pretty sure it's not a good feeling for women. You've had kids, so you just feel helpless on both sides.
Yes, the
And,
feeling of being helpless as the partner. Yes,
Yeah.
I feel that's a really common theme
or helpless as a mother.
yeah, and both. I feel like a lot of the families I speak to is, you know, the child has a preference for the birth mother, which is really normal, and the partner feels helpless. So we really encourage, no, like let's get dad or partner in to do as much of the sleep and settling as possible. A, to give mum a break, but B, because you co-parents. Like it shouldn't all be on the mother. And I think that feeling of helplessness is a really common theme, because especially with breastfeeding mothers, because they feed so much. So it's sort of like, you know, I'm a bloke, I've got useless nipples. Like I physically can't do that. So how can we get them much more involved so they have that sense of confidence and importance around that sort of equation as well?
With the co-sleeping stuff, like what's I guess for people who do have kids that come into their room at midnight or 3 a.m. or whatever, what's the child asking for in that instance, or what are they needing?
So it varies on age. So there's a difference between a toddler hopping out of bed and coming into bed versus a baby coming out of a cot and the parent bringing them in, right?
Yeah.
So let's go toddlers first.
Yeah,
let's do toddlers.
Do toddlers and up.
Yeah, so toddlers, so they're in their own bed, they can get up and out, they're quite mobile.
Yeah.
So toddlers, and we were talking about this before, they're learning the boundaries of life, right? So it is motivating to know that you can get up and go into mum and dad's bed. Their toddlers, regardless of what they're doing in the middle of the night, are looking for a reaction to see where that limit lies. So if your reaction is positive, you know, come into bed, honey, or no, I'll walk you back to bed and I'll lie with you until you're asleep. And also I'll just preface this with saying, if you're happy doing it, then just do it. That's fine. We're talking about people that don't want to do it.
Because there's benefits in terms of connection to co-sleeping for relationship.
And there's also, I'll just quickly touch on this, between control groups and sleep trained groups, there's actually no difference in terms of attachment and bonding and cognitive function. But in terms of, there's no difference.
So whether your kid is
sleep trained or
like
not.
Essentially not. Or whether they do co-sleep, there's no difference in how they feel attached to their parents.
And actually a lot of the time, because the maternal mental health is actually benefited from the sleep trained children, that's more an indicator of where that sort of that bond and attachment comes in as well.
That was with our first, with Willow, like we said, we had heaps of trouble feeding, and she was feeding, and then we were cold feeding, and then she was just feeding on the boob, and then it got to the point where I just said, this is like too stressful. This is affecting your mental health. This is affecting our life more than I think the benefits of breast milk are going to be. Because it's like, they can feel that energy, there's so much more to it than just
it's hormones going through your milk.
It's like if there's stress hormones, and if not stress hormones, but if it's stressful, and it's like there's an energy exchange as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. And if you're resenting your child, and they're like, what the fuck you doing? And that is I can't imagine that's really good.
No.
And that's what I just said to Sam, I said, like, is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Yes.
Is it worth it? And the answer was like a pretty quick no.
No.
And so we just went formula. And she slept like an angel. And it was like, and everyone was happy, and she put on weight and did this, and everyone's health improved, and Sam could do these things, and I was like, why did it take so long? You know?
I think my first Benny, she got to about 3 months and she just started hating breastfeeding. She just was not a fan, And the best thing a lactation consultant said to me was, it's a two-way street. So if Benny's not into it, what stress is it doing to you? And I was like, that's so true. And with formula-fed babies, you can drink as much wine and coffee as you like.
That was not a key motivator, but that was a perk of the transition.
It is. And even like second time around, I got to like 3 months of Milo, and I was like, I don't have time to pump and do all this. I was like, no way, see you later.
I think Sam got to like 6 months,
Go
I
her.
think, with Cara.
Nice.
She I think that was a big thing for her as a mother. It was a big thing to have that connection, and she just really wanted that. She didn't get it with Willow. And then I was so happy that she had that opportunity with Cara, and she was, there was also like Willow also had a light palate, and there's a couple of issues which didn't make breastfeeding for Willow that easy.
Yes.
And with Cara, it was a lot easier.
Yeah.
Plus, she'd had all that practice, and she knew and all that stuff. The knowledge is important.
I want to go back to the sleep deprivation and the resentment towards the baby and stuff like that. And I'll just talk from personal experience. So my second Milo, he's 15 months now, and he was the most wakeful newborn, and I was getting near to no sleep. And so the sleep deprivation was really, really intense. And it gets to a point where, so one of the key things with postnatal depression is, do you feel an attachment or a bond with your child? And when I was assessed at 10 weeks, because I woke up and something was said in the early hours of the morning, and it didn't end well, and I just couldn't stop crying, and I went to the doctor and we did the assessment, and I didn't have that bond with Milo purely because I was just so friggin' tired and exhausted. I would just look at him and be like, flirt, like, whatever.
Yeah.
And then my mother-in-law and my dad would come over and look after him, and he'd cry, and I'd just be like, okay. And that is really, it's such a harrowing thing. And I honestly, like, I feel like those early times were wasted, even though like we're super addicted to each other now. But that bond with your child from something like sleep deprivation is massive, and it takes work to get that back, because I was just disinterested in looking after him because I was so tired. Like, I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror. I looked grey. Like, I was just this shell of a human walking around from something like sleep. And that's why I think, like, people shouldn't have to put up with something like that if we know we can change it.
That's one of I remember when we're first starting, like, getting advice from different people and stuff like that. We can touch on advice from other people soon. But all I heard was women, a lot, like some women sort of saying, "Oh yeah, I gave up the first 12 months of my kid's life just so that I could breastfeed them, or 6 months, or whatever it was." And I was like, "You gave up your life?"
Yeah.
Like,
you've lost yourself.
You've absolutely lost. I was like, kids are supposed to come in and be part of our family. We're not supposed to lose our identity, and they're coming into something. We're not just there as a servant for them.
Yes.
They're like, it sounds like a bit of a harsh thing to say, but it's like they're not. I don't know, they're not everything. They're not
I couldn't agree.
center of the universe. Like, you as a person, like,
you shouldn't have to lose yourself to look after your child.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people, they get to the point where they have lost themselves and they go like, oh my God, I need help. It is a shame that it gets to that point. And I hammer that home, like, you shouldn't have to lose your identity and your sense of self for the sake of something like sleep.
Yeah.
Because that is, as I said before, it's a harrowing experience.
Yeah. And
it doesn't make you a good parent, sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't make you a better mother.
It doesn't make you a better mother that you have given up everything in your entire life to become a mother. That doesn't make you better than other mothers.
Yeah. One of the, I guess, on reflection, when me and Sam speak about, again, I get Willow about our first experience, I was trying to be really helpful. And when Sam said, I want to breastfeed, and I want this help, and I felt, we talked about being helpless as a father, and I was just trying to make things as easy as possible, but also, like, I was trying to, I think I pushed her to, I guess, probably keep her word. I was like, well, you wanted to do this, like, what, like, trying to encourage her to keep going versus probably look at what was actually going on and going, how do we change this? Or do, like, and I guess and that was and when Sam reflects on it, she was like, yeah, I think you were like kind of like not necessarily like too involved, but like unconsciously I was putting a lot of pressure on her.
Yeah.
Like which didn't help.
And that's the friction, because you're encouraging something that she said she's wanted to do, but when you look at the whole picture, because like, yeah, like coming from Sam's perspective, if you had said, oh, like maybe we should try formula, the other friction point is then going, well, that's not the goal though. Like, are you saying that I can't do it? And that is such a huge, that's where the friction starts to come in that little balance.
We definitely didn't communicate as well then as we do now.
And I think, yes. And I think the change in the relationship from becoming a couple to a parent is massive. And I don't know if you experienced this, but the change from having one child to having 2 or 3 or 4, because you go from a team looking after one child to 2 people looking after a child each or whatever. And it's a lot more disconnected because you're essentially juggling everything.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, even now with them being a bit older, it's like and it's like anything. Like, I mean, we started the business together, so we know, I guess, how to work as a partnership.
Yes.
And I think that's and that's one of my big gripes about people who just accept the status quo of wherever they're at, is because a partnership is not a relationship. It's a relationship, but it's not a really beautiful, connected, intimate relationship. And yeah, if life becomes about management, then you just manage everything.
Yes.
Which
it's easily confused. Partnership, relationship.
And I think I think that's probably a question that you sort of almost need to ask yourself weekly or maybe quarterly or whatever. I was like, all right, are we a relationship or are we a partnership right now? It's like, there's been heaps of times where I've just been like, man, we are just passing ships in the night.
Yeah.
We are just doing the things. All our communication is about organisation. And obviously, as you get more kids, that gets harder and you have serious logistical challenges. But
follow the Gottman Institute.
I've heard of it, and I'm sure I've seen some stuff from it.
A couple of stuff, but essentially, like what you're saying is your love account's really empty.
Yeah,
so you need to put into the love account for that sort of stuff. Right. If it's empty, you just sort of passing ships.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Should know what
Google it.
Yeah. What is it?
The Gottman Institute.
Can you spell it?
GOTTMAN. Essentially, it's like filling up a love account so you keep that relationship, because you've taken on parenthood, but you still need to keep that relationship. It's really important. So ship the kids off for a night, go for a date night, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, Luke and Nez have done a bunch of talks in here and stuff about just their relationship coaches and stuff, and about intimacy and all that sort of stuff, and it's totally transformed like our relationship and how connected we are, and it's all wrapped up in your own identity. Like and once you sort of reconnect with your own identity, and one of the best things that Sam did was do her doula course, where she really, I guess, found that feminine part of herself again. And she sort of calls Cara her like healing baby. That she was just like this baby, and I said the breastfeeding was easier, so if we would have had another one like Willow, or if we would have done the same things that we did with Willow, and it was the same experience, I think that would have really turned her off having, whereas she had a really good experience. So now she's like, oh, let's have another one.
The universe puts your kids in front of you for a reason. So Milo is just like the most placid, happiest baby. He just laughs at everything. And if he wasn't like that, I think mentally I would be in a much worse off position than I am now. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, because touching on that whole identity, mother, partner, intimacy, from our perspective, we have a child touching us, asking us for stuff all day, and doing really not sexy things, and then all of a sudden the kids go to bed and it's just oh, do we turn sexy now? No, don't touch me. I've been touched all day. I just want to not have anyone touch me and be nice and quiet. That would be great. I think it's there's a big, obviously there's a huge, and we've spoken about this in one of the roundtables before, but there's a huge hormonal shift
Obviously, once you start breastfeeding and stuff, but when you stop breastfeeding,
Yes.
there's obviously another big, huge hormonal shift. But I think, yeah, with Sam, that was a real. There's probably that period of 6 to 12 months, and for some women, I think even longer, where they sort of don't want to be touched, or there's a real. So I think some women are just raging once they like straight after, like right, like how many people have like kids, their second kid like 10 months or whatever after their, or 11 months after their first fucking child.
Yeah, I know. I've got friends that are 13 months apart.
Oh my God.
13.
Just keen.
Stop it.
But yeah, I guess that's just something to really understand from the bloke's perspective, is like there are things that you can really do to help your partner and support your partner, I guess, probably regain some of that identity and help them feel, I don't know, not necessarily sexy, but help them feel like themselves, and that with additional support may lead to a better intimate connection.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, not may lead to, it will lead to, but there's a whole lot of things, but it's also the same. It's the same strategies as when they're not hormonal.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same strategies. It's like non-intimate touch, like all this stuff that Luke and Nez talk about, communication, connection.
Well, don't just smack me on the ass. Like
Sam played this video last night of like if women did to guys what guys do to women.
I think I've seen that.
This guy is like doing the dishes in the kitchen, and wife just does this to him.
I'm just going to try, because we're talking about sleep, and that just got really deep, which I love. But the thing about like the sleep thing and feeling sexy and stuff, like the anxiety around sleep and getting into bed early with your partner, like parents get into bed and they just go, I'm so anxious because I don't know when my child is going to wake up next. And that is massive. Whereas if you can go to bed and go, I know what's happening, that is a completely different ball game getting into bed. Yeah.
I've had that 100%. Yeah, when you're like, well, I think they're probably going to wake up in 2 hours, so I better not go into deep sleep because I'm just going to wake up like I'm not.
Yeah.
And even and then I've also had the opposite, which is not necessarily like a kid thing, but I've delayed going to bed because I haven't filled my cup up.
Yes.
And so I've delayed going to bed and just done scroll or just whatever, very unproductive things, and not even nourishing things. But I've delayed going to bed because I knew as soon as that alarm goes off, I'm on.
Yeah.
It's game on.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't doing anything for myself in the morning.
Yeah. And
it was just like everything, give. And then you're like, fuck, it's 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Can I just have some space? Well, I don't want to go to sleep, even though that's the one thing that I need. Yeah,
and it's cyclical. Yeah. That's where the cycle comes in. It's really vicious.
And then you have guilt in the morning. You're like, man, I really should have gone to bed.
I was unwinding.
Scrolling Instagram for an hour and a half.
Reels.
Yeah, I was watching reels for an hour, and then I got caught in this whatever.
Yeah, in the real zone.
Hopefully listening to a good podcast or watching a good video. And so just cycling back to the co-sleeping thing, so because we're going pretty good.
I love this.
So there's no actual difference from the studies between. So there's no actual necessary benefit for the kids. No. In terms of like attachment and secure attachment and stuff like that, control versus sleep trained kids. And so are more parents wanting to get their kids to just sleep by themselves? I'm assuming that's why they come to you. Yeah. A lot of people are just like, I co-sleep with my 10-month-old, 2-year-old, whatever. I need to get it back because I'm not sleeping, I'm back at work, or whatever the reason is. Yeah. A lot of the co-sleeping transitions, those families are goal driven. Yeah. The handful of people that say, I just want to stop co-sleeping because like I know I should, that's not a successful recipe for transitioning, because they'll just go, well, I don't have a goal. Like, it's not. That's, if it happens, it happens. It doesn't. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so how long, and I guess this would be dependent on people and how all the stuff, like, is there a certain time frame or a rough time frame from going, my kid comes into my room, I don't know, a few times a week or every night?
I would say 2 weeks.
2 weeks, is that all?
That's it.
Wow.
If you're consistent, because as I said, with that extinction outburst, you get through that first 5 to 7 days and then you're just hammering that message home, really. And the other thing that we see really common is the first week, we might see the transition of the child going to their own bed works beautifully, and we're doing a very gentle strategy. And then they've transitioned to their own bed, great. And then all of a sudden they go, well, why are you sitting in here and not doing anything? That's pissing me off. That's usually the crux where we go, okay, that move has been made beautifully. We actually need to change our strategy now because you're sitting in there just looking at them and not touching them, and that's starting to aggravate them. So that's kind of the really interesting thing about that co-sleeping transition. And you know what? Sometimes you get a week in and that gradual does work really well all the way through, but I would say more often than not, once they've made it to their own bed, it actually just starts to aggravate a lot of children.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
How many hiccups happen in those 2 weeks? Like, how many changes in strategy would you like? Because I think, sometimes it becomes a point where you're sort of flogging a dead horse.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where you just need to be consistent with the same strategy.
Totally.
How many deviations do you think that?
I would say in that first 5 days, that's where you need to make the change in strategy. Otherwise, it becomes confusing, and that's not fair on the child.
Yeah.
So that's where the help of someone looking at it objectively, going, okay, like this has happened the first 3 days, all that sort of pushback, that's all really normal. It might be really hard, but you actually just need to keep going. This is a really normal response. And then they get through and they're like, oh yeah, cool, like cool. And you're the cheerleader in the corner.
Yeah.
If we see very early on in that first sort of 3 to 5 days that strategy is not working for that child, it needs to change then and there.
Yeah.
And then you change your strategy, and then you just sort of like gradually do it less and less and less. Like you fade out of how much you're doing the strategy so that they are sort of sleeping on their own.
Yeah.
But that change in strategy has to happen relatively early on, because if you get towards the end and then you change it, that child's going to be like, well, I was sort of getting used to that, and now you just changed it on me, and now I'm just fucking confused. And as I said, like that is not fair on a child. So a lot of the families are going, oh, we tried this for a couple of days and this and that and that. And I'm like, the kid's just confused,
Yeah.
Really confused.
And how many different strategies are there?
Oh, there's probably about 5 or 6 main ones.
Yeah.
And then you can blend them.
Yeah.
Depending on what the parents are comfortable with, how the child responds to it. And so there's lots of hybrids. So it's pretty normal that with families I work with, it's usually a hybrid. I'd probably say maybe 30% is like, nah, you know what? This is going to work really well for your child. That straight down the line, that seems like it'll work great, and it usually does.
Yeah, we probably, and I guess you said sort of most of them end up being the sort of go in and tap, bedtime, see you in the morning, and do that. I found one of the most helpful things for us was to actually use data. Now, I'm an engineer, so it's up my alley.
I'm a science nerd, so.
But when your kid's crying, and you're like, oh God, it's been like they've been crying for like 5 minutes, and if you actually timed it, and it was like
it's probably like
35 seconds.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, maybe my version of this, maybe my truth here, my version of this story is not the reality. And is data something that you need, or? Yeah.
So like I have to.
It's obviously not there.
So you can tell, like with people's personalities, if they can sort of gauge it off their own internal clock, or whether you have to be like, hey, like, I think your 2 minutes is actually more like 30 seconds. I want you to use a timer. And there's been a lot of studies on waiting 3 minutes once your child starts crying up and escalating for you, and then responding. So if you do that in the kind of, 4 months to like 8, 9 months, there's been a lot of research on sleep predictors at 12 months if you wait the 3 minutes before responding.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of science behind it, because if the child wakes up between a sleep cycle, we can't stop that, and they cry for 30 seconds and then they go back into the next one.
Yeah.
Great. If you rush in straight away,
Yeah.
and they're not really awake, but now you're in there, and you've woken them up, they're going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, I was just yelling out just a little bit, and now what are you doing in here?
Yeah, it's like, oh, hi.
Yeah,
how you going?
yeah.
Time to get up.
Is it time? Yeah, it's confusing. So waiting the 3 to 5 minutes is something that you could implement straight away, no matter your situation, and see how that works.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we sort of rolled off like, it was about 90 seconds. Essentially, if there was a break in the crying, then you restart. Which is like, you're sort of, you get to like 70 seconds, and you're like, oh God.
I'm just going to go in there.
They're going to, please break. And then they do it, they're like, yes, restart the timer. Like,
so if they're like, and this is going back to the volume versus the actual sound. So like if the child is taking breaks, changing sounds, or using an sound, so they might go blah, 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 I would just chill.
Yeah.
If they're going where, and it's constant escalating, then we respond. That's more emotion.
More emotion. Yeah.
But if they're literally yelling, going
oh yeah, just yelling, just
yelling.
Just like, I want to hear my voice.
I'd just hold off a little bit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think so. That really, I mean, that worked really well for us. But yeah, it was really challenging. But yeah, we had to sit there with the timer and just go, restart, because we couldn't. And sometimes you sort of, but I found so often, literally it was about 70 seconds was like, it was like, and they might do that like 5 times.
Yeah.
It was like every time while they were doing that sleep training. It was like every time, it was about the same time that they would stop crying. Yeah. And it was like, oh, okay, well, at least you're consistent. And we had some comfort in that.
Yes.
But we had data. And I think like, I don't know, like, if I was having trouble, like what did we do? We started, like, we were recording heaps of stuff around like when we were feeding. Yeah. Like with Willow and that. Just because it was like, well, I don't know how much formula she's taking, and so we just started recording, like, just to make sure we're getting the volume in. Yeah. And I think I'd probably, if I was having trouble with sleep, I'd probably do a similar thing. Would be like, how many times did they wake? Oh, man, she woke up like 5 times last night. It was actually like twice. Yeah. Or it was 10 times or whatever. Yeah. So.
And I think it's interesting that you bring up the feeding and stuff, because there's so much. Like, there's the sleep stuff, but you actually have to make sure that everything else is on track first. So feeding and solids and stuff, if there is anything that's sort of jumping out at me, we're not even going to touch sleep. Yeah. We're going to get that food first, weight gain first, health history first, any red flags, they get referred out. Yeah. You can improve sleep without actually doing anything to the sleep. Yeah. And I think that's really important, instead of people just going, oh, this is my problem, and sleep consultants going, well, here's a sleep training strategy, and actually, like, maybe that baby's failing to thrive, or they've got latching issues, or whatever it is, they've got silent reflux, or whatever that is.
They're bloody hungry, like they're genuinely hungry.
Yeah, or they've got a breathing issue, they've got obstructive sleep apnea, or if they've got, laryngomalacia that they need to get over. Like, there's so many things.
Do you have like a rough percentage of like how many people you would see is like, oh yeah, cool, this is just sleep training, and how many, like, what percentage would be like, there's something more to this, like food, like you said, respiratory issue or something?
Yeah. I never do isolated families. Like, I will do everything for every family. Yeah. A lot of it, especially coming into that sort of 8 to 12 months, is a lot to do with milk and solids, because so at 12 months, food is the main source of nutrition and milk is the top up. Yeah. And there's that
if you're still breastfeeding.
And still with formula stuff as well. But that stupid saying, food before 1 is just for fun. Oh yeah. Is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because that rhymes, which is lovely, but first 6 months, milk is the priority, start solids, and then at about 9 months to prepare them for 12 months. You need to start transitioning that priority.
Yeah.
And milk won't satisfy them, fulfill all their nutritional needs. So if there's lots and lots of milk and not much solids happening, then we can actually see a lot of sleep issues arise out of that. So we need to make sure that that transition is happening before 1 year of age, because their blood sugars will be more stabilized. It's going to support their growth and development. It's going to keep their tummies fuller for longer. That's probably a really common thing that I see in kids drinking, nearly a litre of milk.
Jesus.
Yeah, like formula. At 8 or 9 months. It's so much, right? It affects the absorption of nutrients such as iron, magnesium, which can cause restlessness at night. And then at 12 months, the upper limit for milk intake, whether it be formula or cow's milk, is 500 mils. And New Zealand changed their recommendation to 350 mils about maybe nearly 18 months ago.
Yeah, right.
We haven't followed suit, but I think it's always interesting to bring that up because, like they've lowered it for those reasons.
Is that because of some of the potential, I guess, health impacts of dairy and the inflammation?
It's more for the the absorption of nutrients.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's just not the level of milk that would take away from the appetite for solids because it wouldn't be fulfilling their nutritional needs.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like for my insurance, if you ever have questions about solids, you have to ask your GP or pediatrician.
Yeah. Yeah. Disclaimers. Yeah, we'll put them in at the start. We don't know what we're talking about.
No.
So one of the things that's really annoying me at the moment.
Consult for you, isn't it?
No. No, we're really good. Like our kids, I always felt bad when, like, and I was talking to a guy just before about, I think his kids are a bit older, or someone said to me, it's like, oh, I've had 8 years of like really rubbish sleep, and I'm like, well,
fuck that.
Well, I'm not going to lie. We moved Willow into her own room after 8 weeks because I was like, fuck, if this kid is sleeping, this is way too just like, so I think I'm a relatively light sleeper.
And babies are really noisy.
And I was so anxious, and it was terrible.
And they just grunt and growl, and they are noisy.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell you how long it was in the bedroom for, but it probably wasn't. It might have been a little bit longer, but it wasn't, because I was probably less anxious and I just would go to sleep. But maybe that's my stuff to work.
We moved Benny at 8 weeks because she started rolling and she wouldn't fit in the cot. And then as soon as she was in her own room, we all slept better because we weren't waking up to her every sound.
Yeah, we weren't waking up, so I feel like we've had really, like, our kids haven't necessarily slept 7 till 7, but they pretty much do now. Like, it's taken us a while to get there.
Yeah.
Like Willow was because with the gym and stuff, I would finish later, and I wanted to like have some time before I went to bed. So a lot of the time, Willow wouldn't go to bed till 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and then she would still sleep till 7. So we would have a later put down.
Yeah.
But actually, since we put them both in the same room, bang, 7 till 7.
So
it's
good.
like, and it's pretty good. But yeah, just the issue in the last few months is Cara she just sort of cries for about 15 seconds. And she was doing that maybe like 4 to 5 times a night.
How old is she?
She would have been about 18 months.
Interesting.
Yeah,
this is a great segue, guys.
And so, and now it's probably like, I think last night she did it twice.
Yeah.
But what I did was I turned the sensitivity down the monitor.
Oh yeah,
so
I
couldn't hear it, and because Sam's partially deaf, so she takes the hearing aids out.
Yeah.
So she's fine. And unless I push her, I'm like,
love that for her.
It's your turn.
So
like that was part of my question. Is like,
what is happening?
I guess the sleep cycles. Like, how common is it to, I guess, cry for 10 or 15 seconds?
Yeah.
And the second question is like, what are some of the key leap milestones where you really see some of those shifts happen?
Yeah. Okay, so 18 months, you'll start to see the development of dreams and nightmares and night terrors start. And so that might be what you're actually seeing is, so night terrors are generally before midnight because it's in your deep non-REM sleep. And so night terrors are where a child gets stuck in between sleep cycles where their body is awake, but their brain is asleep.
Yeah.
So they might sit up and they might cry, scream, thrash around, but they're actually asleep. So you do not interact with them. If you're in there, you're just making sure they're not going to like injure themselves, right? If you try and wake them up, they will be extremely not disturbed, but startled. So it's like sleepwalking, right? You don't wake up a sleepwalker because the body's awake, but the mind's asleep.
Right.
So they get stuck between sleep cycles.
Yeah.
So the best thing you can do is make sure that they're safe, and generally it can last anywhere up to, it's generally up to about 5, can be 20 minutes.
Shit.
Yeah, really more severe cases. And they just flop back down and go to sleep.
Yeah.
And you would never mention it. Because as soon as you bring it up at breakfast, they idea about it. So might take 15, 20 minute normal time that it happens and sort of wake them up a little bit and then settle them back down. So you've actually assisted that transition through sleep cycles. Yeah, so it's really distressing for the parents, but actually the child doesn't really know about it.
Right.
And they generally grow out of them by about night. Kids can also, they might scream when the light's turned off, because they wake from a dream. Seeing around the room is comforting because their imaginations can't run wild. Yeah. So that might be what you're seeing.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's like crying out in between sleep cycles is really normal. It might happen on days where they're at preschool or at daycares because it's so stimulating. So their brain is just trying to consolidate and chunk and store all of that.
Yeah.
Or if they've learnt a new skill such as walking, talking, all that sort of stuff, and their brain is just so busy, it just gets a bit stuck. So it's really normal. So if a kid kind of yells out a little bit, then that's fine. Yeah,
we've definitely noticed, like for me, I noticed it a lot. She's obviously like her understanding of language, like everything, just like it was at the same time where like I was just like, I think she's just like really taking on that developmental, like there's a real brain development going on, and she's just becoming a little human, and it's just like there's just a lot of stuff going on up there.
And developmental times in the night are generally, they come out of their deep non-REM sleep, and so they go into their sort of light active sleep. And if they sort of wake between, say, about 1 and 4 a.m. and they are just practicing and having a ball, having a party, driving noises, but they're essentially happy, that's just a developmental perfect time to practice, apparently.
Yeah, right.
So I would just leave them.
Is it the, like, if the, you know, you said if it's after midnight, you might need to go in and comfort them.
Yes.
Is it the same, like 3 minute, is the same rules sort of apply, or you sort of want to go in there?
It depends. Like, you know, they might need, if they're really bad dreams, you might need to, depending on their age, like you can do things like draw out the dream and then like rip it up and throw it in the bin. That's sort of more on the like severe end of things. You can use like a special room spray. So like, nothing's going to get you because we sprayed the room. It's like Aerogard, but for dreams. That can work really well too. It could just be like lavender spray or something. So that works really well.
Lavender spray. I'm going to spray it all over you so you are knocked out. I'm not going to lie, there's been quite a few times where I've put a reasonable amount of lavender on the kids' pillows.
That's not where I thought. I thought you were going to say like whiskey in their bottle.
Like the first time we used lavender, like just on ourselves, like I was like, oh yeah, like well, I wasn't like I was having some issues with my sleep, and I was like, yeah,
Oh, it knocks me out.
put it on my feet, put it around the neck,
See you later.
and a bit under my nose or whatever. And I honestly woke up. I woke up the next day like I'd had 100 beers. Like I was like knocked me for 6 days. Like, I was so out of it. I was like, maybe a little overdose on lavender.
I had an auntie that used to come and put lavender on her pillows, and any time I was being naughty and not going to sleep, and she'd come in with lavender, I'd be like, no.
So good.
But tying back to the point of the conversation, the developmental periods that you mentioned before. So I think like the big one that the internet likes to scare us about is that 4-month regression. Okay. The 4-month is that permanent change in sleep cycles. So that's generally where like you might have a really sleepy newborn and they do really big stretches overnight, because the overnight sleep cycles go from 4 to 6 hours as a newborn, and at 4 months they go to 2 to 4 hours. So they're more adult-like.
Yeah.
And that's in the daytime, you'll see those 45-minute cycles start to really pop up. So that's a permanent change in sleep. That is the sleep turning more adult-like. That is unavoidable. And so that's where we can start to introduce those settling strategies because of that maturation of their sleep biorhythms.
Yeah.
When you look at things like 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, it's really more to do with developmental stuff. So 6 months, you've got object permanence is probably the main one. So instead of you leaving the room and disappearing, you leave the room and you're actually doing something else. So it's like FOMO, essentially. Yeah. 8 and 10 months, like 10 months, you have separation anxiety at its peak. You've got things like sitting, crawling, pulling to stand. That's sort of more what they're in line with. Yeah. 12 months, you've got walking, you've got, language really starting to kick off. Then it's sort of more like 18 months at the moment for you maybe, and that's walking, talking, another wave of separation anxiety. And then 2 years is kind of like another repeat of that.
Fantastic, I can't wait.
And then you've got a 3-nager, and that's just attitude.
It's funny, like Willow's, I think Willow runs hot. And so most of her bad experiences of sleep have been because she was overheated. And she will vomit. She's vomited a couple of times. And I'm like, oh my God, you're sick, you've got gastro.
She's hot.
And it was like, I actually think she was just really hot, and she just got overwhelmed, and and she'll do this cough, and she's like, and it's like, oh God, you're gonna be sick. So now we're just like, if you get hot, take your jumper off. So if don't I guess she can cause
a lot of sleep disruptions. And because there's these biological nap windows in the day where body temperature drops and cortisol lowers, and it's like a sweet spot to put your child down for a sleep, right? So if the child's overheated, it's just going to mess up how they go to sleep, and they're not going to be able to get into that deep sleep because all their hormones are fucked up. I know, hormones.
Are there any old wives' tales? Because you just brought up that thing about nature, like nature and the tribal stuff, and I was like, oh, like, are there any old wives' tales or like traditional stuff which is like,
like the baby will sleep when they want to sleep? It's like, no, sometimes you really have to help them get there. That's probably the biggest one.
That you really need to help your children get there. They don't let them control them.
Because essentially like talking about like the body temperature changes and stuff like that. So if you miss the window for sleep, they get like a second wind because their hormones struggle to down regulate. So they'll struggle to get into that sleep where that rejuvenation and regulation happens back to that homeostatic level. And that's just a cyclical thing. It can lead to behavioural problems and misdiagnosis of like ADD and stuff like that, purely just because the child's tired, chronically overtired.
I think when I look at our experience with that, we had to really know, because our ability to our ability to really truly assess when our kids are tired, I don't think is that good.
Yeah.
Like it's like
We have to learn.
Man, like honestly, like Cara, even like the kids now, like it'll be like 7 o'clock and they are going mental.
Yeah.
So we're trying to like we've got the calm music on. We're like, all right.
And they're just wrestling.
Honestly, we're like got the calm music on, and Sam trying to do this thing where we put like a nice fluffy soft blanket out.
Oh yeah.
And we're just like, all right, we'll just have some like 10 minutes of like calm downtime. And all I want to do is wrestle and then it's like hugs, and then it's like the hugs turn into wrestling, and then they have the time of their life. It's like it's bedtime.
It's bedtime. See you later.
And they've been like that. It's been like that. Like it's like after I don't know. Is there something about bars that stimulates them? Because I found that they're just like. It's like they'll be tired before bath, and then they're like, "Oh, we're ready to go again."
So there's like a two-prong to this one. So some kids do really well from a really big sensory outlet before they go to sleep, because it's just how they process their emotion, because they don't know how to express their emotions. So they need that sensory thing. So like this is where you can see things like hitting and biting come in when kids are tired, because they just don't know how to express that overtiredness. So like Milo bites my shoulder if he's tired.
Yeah.
The bath thing, like, yeah, it's fun for them, but you've got 2 toddlers. They're probably just trying to push a bit of a boundary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, shit, yeah. Baths are actually really good because, as we said, with the body temperature drop, they get into this warm bath and they get out of the bath, their body temperature drops. Boom, primo for sleep.
Yeah.
It's great. Even if they don't need a bath that day, more like younger babies that don't need a bath, I would still just do it just to help those hormones along.
Yeah, well, we just did it from a cleanliness perspective, but I think it's probably good hygiene. But yeah, just like as part of that nighttime routine was just really like, we did this, and then we had dinner, and then we have like just so it's the same routine.
Yeah.
Like that was huge for us. Was just like set yourself up for success, set them up for success.
Yeah.
And it's like. It might be like dinner, you make, obviously there's better ways to do it than others, but it's like dinner, bath,
wrestle,
wrestle, short amount, books.
Yeah, books, and songs.
And then bed. And we've been pretty firm on like, I think with Willow, it was, we never read more than 3 books.
No.
It was like 3 books, that's it. And sometimes it's 2, and now it's like, now we can kind of get away with 1 or none sometimes.
Yeah, nice.
Just if like they're really tired or whatever. But we have to say, I don't know if most kids are like this, but we really have to say to Willow like an hour before or half an hour before. It's like, okay, so so we're gonna have a bath.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna do any books tonight because it's really late, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then she has a better time accepting it when it gets the time.
Because toddlers love predictability, because it makes them feel safe and secure. Because if you say something and you follow through with it, that calm, firm boundary, no matter what day they've had, maybe they've been putting on a face all day at preschool for their friends and educators, and they come home to have a meltdown because they need to let it all out, but then they know what to expect, and that really makes them feel secure and safe. That's what a boundary is. It's safety and security, especially for toddlers. And bedtime routines, you can start from day one from home from the hospital.
Yeah.
Just that transition from busy activity, quiet and calm. It's about sending consistent signals, like dark room, white noise, books, cuddle, song, like boom. So even after your wrestle, or when my kids wrestle, they wrestle, that's good. I'm like, yep, get it out of your system. Milo goes to bed, I sing him Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and he's out because he knows that song. So that's why it's so important, because essentially we just want to send signals.
Yeah.
Then anyone can do it anywhere, like at Nanny and Poppy's house.
Yeah.
Make sure you sing this song.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like we had something for Willow. I can't remember what it was, but I started singing. It's not the Wizard of Oz. It's the Von Traps. What's the?
Do.
So I sing that to her.
Cute.
Which is like just a good song to practice. No, I've got a terrible voice for singing.
Practice the scales.
I need to practice my scales. But now Willow sings it as well.
Yeah.
And so like she knows most of the words, but sometimes Cara would be quite unsettled going to bed.
Yeah.
And I'll go in there, and if I sing that song, I think she knows that that's
yeah.
the bedtime song.
Yeah. Yeah, Benny's was A Whole New World from Aladdin. Yeah, she loves that one. But she'll come into my room and go, "Oh, sing Pink and Green, red and yellow and pink and green." I'm like, okay, bud. Yeah. So it's like they do like that stuff because they know what to expect.
I just wanted something which was longer than Incy Mincy Spider.
Yeah.
Because it was just too short.
And not as fit as Incy Mincy Spider.
Unless I have to repeat, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So it was more for my benefit than this. So. Anyway, anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think we've done well.
I think it's been awesome.
I think we've gone everywhere.
Yeah. Obviously we sort of spoke before about like changing the stigma of sleep training. Yeah, and we can talk briefly about some forums. Friends' advice.
Yeah, don't compare.
Is often the worst advice.
Don't compare.
Unless they're extraordinarily successful in what they do, and might also not be applicable to you, and they probably don't know all the facts. But forums are probably not the worst place to get information, because some people have some really, like I read some stuff today and I was like, that's not bad advice, but it's never going to be specific enough for you to take action on to get the result that you want with. And we've spoken about this before, like parenting and relationships are arguably the two biggest things in our lives. We'll go and get business coaching, or we'll go get career advice. We'll get financial help. We'll get a personal trainer, or we'll go get some help with our fitness and whatever. But we're expected to know exactly how to parent and exactly how to raise our kids naturally. And we're expected to know how to have a great relationship when arguably most people don't seem to have had the best role models. And our parents were brought up in a different time, and their advice is not always the best advice. And their way of doing things might not be how you want to do things. And for me, whenever I've got coaching on stuff like this, like when we had lactation consultant and stuff like that, or the sleep stuff, it was just like, just to have something there which you could be confident in was just, if the kids were sitting there and they're bawling their eyes out, and it was, if I knew that it was like 90 seconds or 3 minutes, and I knew that 3 minutes was okay. They're not gonna hurt themselves, or we're not bad people. We're not going to be judged. Then that eliminated a lot of anxiety and eliminated a lot of stress. And when you're less stressed, you can generally make a more constructive, thoughtful approach to whatever the situation is.
I think it's important that you're cool and calm and confident in control, because
cool and confident.
Your child will pick up on that and they'll follow your lead.
100%.
And that's why, like, when we look at settling strategies, so much of it, it's about the child, but we go like, okay, like, so let's say I'm speaking to parents and both their mental health is suffering. And I'm going to say to them, I don't think you should be in the room the whole time, because that's not going to be good for you. You need to go outside in between, listen to a song for a minute and then go back in, because they're going to pick up if you stay in there, and it's just like Anchorman and they're in the glass cage of emotion. That's how I describe it. So like, if people haven't seen Anchorman, I'm like, fuck, like I don't know how to describe this. But literally it's like, it is this cyclical clusterfuck if everyone's staying in there. But if they can duck in and out, it's going to be better for everyone sometimes.
Yeah, I remember, like, once I got a better appreciation of that, my energy, they were feeding off my energy. And Sam's always like, just walk like with the kids, you're like, when you tiptoe around, you're like, don't wake them up. And you're like stressed. And then they wake up, you're like, God, they've caught me. Whereas like, just, if you're walking with calmness and confidence and you just breeze in or breeze out. But I was when we were having some trouble in that, I just tried to, it's like when you're trying so hard and you've done it 3 or 4 times or 5 or 6 or 10 times or 100 times, and then the partner goes in and they put them straight to sleep. It's like, because they've just come in with a different attitude, with a different energy. And that's what I really tried to do.
It's like getting to off control, and they're like, did you do that? And I'm like, because I'm cool. Like I'm literally going in there cool as a cucumber.
And you probably have less attachment to the outcome of them. Like, if I don't get to sleep right now, then I'm gonna have to do this and this, and you sort of like play it out. You play out. Well, that's what anxiety is, future focused. So you're playing out the future in the moment. So for me, it was just like, do some breath work, i.e., just take some big breaths. And just and I would even like, I'm pretty sure this is not good advice.
We're not here for advice.
But if I would hear one of the girls in Monta, I would like send them telepathic messages. I'm like, Willow, you're all good. Just be calm, just chill. Like I would just be like, I'm okay with, like, I would just try to say to myself, like, I'm okay with whatever's happening.
With it,
And it's like, you're okay, we're okay. I would just try to be like super calm from like wherever I was. And I'm pretty sure it didn't help, but it helped me.
You can fake it and they will buy it.
Yeah.
Fake your confidence because it'll pay off. 100%, I agree with that.
Yeah. But no, that was a really good take, like, because I thought, the co-sleeping thing is obviously is a big thing, and just knowing that it's 2 weeks of, sounds like it's probably like 1 week of hard work, and then a week of just making sure that you're consistent,
keeping it going and tweaking all the other stuff.
Is there anything like, for people who like travel a lot, is that I'm assuming that's really disruptive for kids? Like,
it is. The best advice for travel is lots of sunlight and waking the kid up at a regular time every day.
Just wake up.
And
that sets your circadian rhythm.
Rhythm and your melatonin and stuff.
And your melatonin is the first moment you see daylight. So that sets your bedtime.
I would also say, like, if they're sleeping in a dark sleep space, because then melatonin surges in darkness, we all know that. Serotonin surges in daylight, and serotonin is a really good precursor hormone for melatonin. So if you go into the daylight before you go into the darkness, you're actually helping that shift along, right? So we're doing what nature does, but we're just kind of kicking it up the butt. So people who travel a lot, lots of sunlight, wake the kid up at a regular time each day, pack a roll of tin foil in your bag, and you can just black out those windows. That is the travel hack. You can just slap it up.
That's interesting. Tin foil. You heard it here first. Or probably not.
Creating crack-ins all over hotel rooms.
Awesome. Thanks heaps.
That's right.
That was great.
Anytime.
Hopefully you guys got something out of it, because I certainly did. So
do I do a plug? Can I do a plug?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so Donna's here of her own accord. Donna has a business doing exactly what we've been talking about, helping parents and kids sleep better. I'm
called Dreamy Babies.
Dreamy
Babies. It's pink.
And she's on all the socials. So Dreamy Babies.
Like that.
It's like that. Skinny QR code.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you'd be able to do it.
Yeah, fuck yeah, you would be able to.
You reckon?
Yeah.
We'll have to test it.
Do I?
It's very good. Like I said, I think that's really encouraging to, like, not necessarily for ourselves, but when I'm talking to other people, it's like, it's probably 2 weeks of work if you want to change that. I think that's the biggest thing. You have to want to change it. But
I never sugarcoat that. I'm like, the first 1-2 nights are probably going to be really shit, but you push through them, you'll be sweet.
That's what. So talk to an expert. That was the message of the forums. Was don't take advice from
Don't take advice from forums. They're a dangerous wormhole.
Get some professional advice, and that's the investment that we made in a lactation consultant was worth its weight 10 times over. And if you look at, I don't know how much you charge, but if you look at how much you're charging compared to the next 5 years of sleep, I'd say it's pretty. I imagine it's relatively inconsistent.
Look at how much you spend on like wine or beer or Botox. You can spend it on sleep.
I actually had this thought last night, because I've been a bit crook the last few days, and I was like, there's that whole analogy of like, poor health costs you more in the long run. I was like, I actually think poor health costs you more in the short term. I was like,
Yes.
you think about, all right, when you get sick, it's like, all right, you don't go to work, so you're not productive. You
Yeah.
might have sick leave and stuff, but you're not productive. I own a business, so I'm definitely not productive. But you have to go and buy drugs, and then and if you're smart, you'll go and buy a shitload of vitamins and all the healthy stuff. And you go through tissues and just like,
and then your kids get sick, you have to pick them up from daycare, so you get charged, and it's just
they're just all the compound effects of like being sick. It's just like, I was thinking about water. I was like, man, you have longer showers, like all these little things. It's like, and it just sucks. And it's like, from a pure cost perspective, I think it's probably cost you a lot more money to live when you're not feeling healthy.
The number one thing people say to me, like I would say 95% of families I work with go, oh, how did we not do this sooner? Like, fuck, we should have just bit the bullet. Bitten the bullet? Bit the bullet.
Yeah, bit the bullet 9 months ago or 5 years ago.
And I'm like, I just don't know how you've gotten to a year and not,
What's the oldest kids that you...
Up to 5.
Up to 5.
Yeah, it's up to school.
And after 5, what's...
You probably have to refer out to a sleep study.
Okay.
Yeah, because it'd be a bit more ingrained. Yeah.
So refer out to a sleep study. What does that mean?
You probably have to go to a GP. They might refer you to a sleep study at a hospital.
Okay.
And then you sort of might look down the road of occupational therapy or even like psychologists and stuff like that too.
Yeah, right.
It just depends what's happening.
Could you employ the same, say if you've got a 7-year-old that's coming into your bed like every second night or whatever?
They're smart.
Could you employ the same strategy and still have success?
Well, they're smarter, so you can probably just essentially like motivate them with something.
Yeah, okay.
Motivate's another word for bribe, but
Yeah, okay. But you still need to be obviously
it's just putting in a boundary.
Putting a boundary in.
Like the boundary is this.
Yeah.
If you do this, we'll reward you with this. Positive reinforcement works a lot better than negative reinforcement.
Yeah. Awesome.
Love that.
Thanks, Eve.
Thanks for listening to the Junto Men's podcast. Our mission is to share high quality information for regular blokes who either want to be better or who might be going through some tough stuff. We really hope you got some value out of listening today. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So if you did get some value out today, we'd love it if you left us a comment, we read them all, you shared it with a mate, or even gave us a 5-star review. We love getting those. If any of what we have spoken about today is interesting to you and you'd like to know more about what we're about and what we do, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or on our website in the link to the notes. We'll hopefully talk to you soon. Cheers.